Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Growth Show. I am Dr. Perry. Today we have with us Don Power. Don and his wife own Marriage and Family Works, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And it was founded in 2008 after a crisis in their own marriage, which included infidelity. After deciding that divorce was not an option for them, they began seeking restoration for their marriage through traditional marriage counseling. What they found was that conventional therapy didn't quite empower them to solve their own problems. So today, Don and Angie continue to coach couples privately now, as through their workshops and seminars to help give their, information and journey and problem-solving skills to their clients. They teach material which is a culmination of all the skills and education they received along the way in a very practical, hands-on approach, and have trained other marriage couples to be marriage coaches as well. They have three children: Shane, Dustin, and Colton. Don, welcome to the show.
Well, nice to be here. Thank you for making time for both of us.
Absolutely. We ran into each other about this topic on marriage and business, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you to talk about your story. But I'll let you fill in these blanks. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, even the story of you and your wife, kind of coming through the traditional marriage counseling direction, and what you guys learned along the way, and we'll learn from you through your experience. Why don't you start us out?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you the 5 mile high view. I grew up in an alcoholic, abusive household. I never saw or heard the word love, was never hugged. I just never saw any kind of healthy relationship. I saw just the opposite. My dad was both physically abusive and an alcoholic, a lot of anger. My poor wife grew up with a mother who had been married multiple times, father who left her when she was a baby, and she was molested by a couple of men after that her mom was involved with. And so we both come from trauma childhoods. And what we didn't know that we didn't know is that we'd have to deal with that later in life. Like, those things that happened to us in our past, if we don't fully get help with those things, that they will come back to have an impact. And so for me, my dad raised me in a home where anger ran the show. And he also had pornography everywhere. And he also had alcohol everywhere. So I grew up in a home with no boundaries. And so that was kind of like my programming. So like we're on a program right now, but I want everybody to consider that your programming comes from the first 10 years of your life. It's like, what did I see? What did I experience? What were my circumstances, both the good and the bad? And if you have a lot of bad stuff, guess what? You have a lot of bad programming. So, we were both left with that. And, because of our programmings, we made a lot of bad decisions through relationships. And I met Angie at the age of 30. She was 23. I met her in Naples. I did have a child from a previous marriage. But we fell in love. So we thought, well, we'll figure it all out. And, we'd go to church on Sunday, we'd watch the kids, and we started having babies of our own. And, we were the perfect American couple, the house on the water, the Lexus is in the driveway, the boat's on the dock, the jet skis are there. We travel, we got money, we have everything that America says you need. But we did not have peace. We did not know how to talk to each other when there was a problem.
Hmm.
And a lot of our problems stemmed from our sexuality and raising children. So I grew up in a home about rules. My dad ruled by rules. What he said goes. And Angie wanted to run the house by relationship. And so we never could get on the same page of that. In our sex life, I thought sex once a day was a good idea. She thought sex once a month was a good idea. We never could get on the same page. And what did this do? After about 10 years of not settling it, both of us end up very frustrated. And again, I want to keep in mind, I'm in church on Sunday. We're doing the right thing. We tithe. We help a lot of people. We are good people. All of a sudden, I find myself in an affair with one of my secretaries at work. And it was a sexual affair. And I lasted about 3 months. I came home and told my wife what I had done. I expected her to divorce me, and she did not. But what she did do was get even. She had an affair for about a year with someone emotionally. So, guys, I want you to hear this. Um, Mine was a sexual affair, but I want to tell you the pain of when someone gives their heart to someone else, it's very, very painful. And you might be that person also. When you give your heart to somebody, it's almost as bad as giving your body, or sometimes even worse. So this emotional connection that she had, we had to come over both these affairs and figure out we have two little kids at home, 4 and 5 years old. How are we going to survive this? And so we tried different types of therapy. We'd go to church, see the counselor there. He would give us some advice, and my wife could not get to forgiveness. And I was trying to be a better man, trying to learn things about myself. But it was a very painful process because we had no trust with each other. And so, after about 2 years of failing miserably at trying to get better with each other, I remember coming home one day and I said, "Honey, maybe we should get a divorce. You can't forgive me. And I understand that you can't forgive me, but we can't live our life like this." And I will tell you that God had a conversation with her, and she had an opportunity to forgive me. And then from there, we started learning. We went on a trek to travel all over the
Mm.
United States, Europe, be trained by the best doctors money could buy, the best therapists, both secular and faith-based, to not just save our marriage, not just put a Band-Aid on it, but to really have a very highly successful marriage. So that's kind of like the nasty, how we got to where we're at, and there's a lot of stuff in between. But and I'm gonna let you ask me any questions about what I just said there.
Yeah, I actually just make a comment. This is what you brought up is through these affairs is actually very in line with a lot of the research out there with couples, that men obviously, um, are caught in affairs that are tend to be physically, connected or sexually connected, where women oftentimes begin with an emotional affair, and
Yes,
that can it can still lead to a sexual affair because the man usually on the other end wants the sexual and the physical, right? But
yes,
most women find that if they're emotionally attracted to someone, sometimes they don't necessarily see that it's the same or that it's
yeah,
similar.
correct.
I'm not saying that it is the
Yep,
same, but it is very, very similar in the fact that you're exactly right. You're not giving all of your heart and soul to your spouse. You're giving only part of it because the other part is left with someone else.
yes.
But yeah, continue on, Don. I appreciate you mentioning this and bringing this out, because there are different kinds of affairs. And quite honestly, when we say the word affair or infidelity, a lot of times we think instantly it's sexual, right? That's the
Yep.
assumption.
Yes, it
But
is.
it can be financial, and I've seen financial problems. We call it financial infidelity, right? Where
Yes,
people are
yes,
stealing money from your spouse, and
yes,
I'm not saying like buying a candy bar. I'm talking millions of dollars all of a sudden are gone, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all of a sudden they've got a huge problem, right? Because the
yeah,
trust is broken. That
yes.
intimacy, that being able to rely on that other person is broken. Um, but I love that your wife and you have got to this place of forgiveness. We could spend hours just on that topic, but I am curious about what you guys learned through this and what was the framework that you took away that actually helped you to move forward.
So I was always a fence sitter Christian. And what I mean by that, I like sitting on the fence. Like, if God served me, I would be on that side of the fence. If the world was serving me, I could jump on that side of the fence. And it was excuse me, a very comfortable place that I had lived my life in. So I would say that I wasn't a full blown believer, or I lacked something in that arena. So I went to what was called a men's encounter. It was a 3-day event where I really transformed my relationship with God. In other words, I really got that how real He is, and maybe there's something bigger to my life than what I know. So I made myself. I woke up to a huge accountability that I didn't know I was going to have to have. And for those of you that are listening, it's going to be hard for you to hear what I'm saying. Maybe. When I found out that God was real, it actually made me mad. And here's why.
Hmm.
I could no longer pretend He wasn't real. You see, before I could pretend, God's anything like my dad. There's nothing good about that. I failed with God many times. I felt he failed me many times. So there really wasn't a relationship. So I had a lot of false belief systems around this, but that weekend changed everything for me. And some miracles started happening, like literal miracles. And maybe someday we'll talk about that on the show, but not today. And so he proved to me how real he is. And from that moment, I just felt I had this new calling. And the calling was to make a difference for other people. And so all this education that my wife and I got to help and restore our marriage and really give us the skills to stay married successfully and lovingly, now I felt he wanted us to move forward and help others with it. And so we started teaching in a church. This was about 2006 or 2005. Yeah, it was around 2005. And we noticed, and we started leading a small group for marriages. And we noticed a few couples would come, but we also knew there was a lot of struggling marriages. It was a pretty large church, and many people wouldn't come. And here's what we found out why people didn't want to look bad going to a marriage class. They didn't want to be perceived as they had marriage problems. And so we continued that for about a year. And then, literally, again, for those of you that uh, can hear this, I heard God's voice say, Don, I want you to buy two buildings. He told me where they were at and open up a marriage ministry where anybody could come, any faith, wherever they're at, they're welcome. Don't charge them if they don't have money, just let them come. And so we did that in 2008. And my wife and I we bought the buildings, put them in the nonprofit. We paid all the bills out of our pocket. I had a successful automotive export company, so financially we were being provided, but we just committed ourselves to helping as many people as we could. And then here's what happened. We were doing all this work for the kingdom, if you will, and our own marriages started struggling for our children because we were gone so much, doing good work, right? But now our kids are suffering. They're teenagers. They're having a lot of bad behaviors. And so we had to really pull back from that ministry for a while and quit going so hard at it as we um, brought more
Hey, Don,
stability to our children.
can I
Yes.
can I stop you? I think my internet was unstable
Yeah.
there and it bumped us back. Can you go back to where you were saying we started leading these groups at church? I know that is a
No
little
problem.
bit, but can you do that?
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
So no problem. So we started leading small groups at church, and we would offer different educations that we had been taught in like a 6-week program. And we noticed that not many people came. And we knew there was a lot of marriages in this church that were struggling. Some of them were our friends, but no one would come to a class because they didn't want to look bad. They didn't want others
Mhm.
to know that they were struggling in their marriage. One of the things that I think we suffer sometimes inside the church is a fear of looking bad or being judged. So we did that for about a year, and then I got a calling literally like 3 o'clock in the morning in 2008. And I heard what I would say is God's voice say, Hey, Don, I want you to go buy these two buildings on Manatee Avenue and open up a nonprofit ministry where anybody can come to get help with their marriage. And this is what I
Mm.
literally said at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, and I'm like, it's 2008. We're in a financial crisis. No one's going to loan us money for a building. This is just dumb. And so I went, and I know it's terrible to talk. If that's God talking, for me to be that disrespectful, but that's the way it was for me, for those of you that can hear that. So the next morning I woke up and I said, God, if that was really you, you got to move mountains because there is no way possible this can happen. And so I went and met the people that owned the building. What I didn't know, it was in foreclosure.
Mm.
We were able to secure a loan in 2008 as a brand new nonprofit. The banker that put the loan together is still in our lives today. A matter of fact, we still coach him and his wife. And it's like a living testimony to if God wants something, anything is possible. So we're
Wow,
still there in those buildings on Manatee Avenue.
that's
In those
fantastic.
buildings, yeah, in those buildings also for the first 8 or 10 years, my wife and I paid all the bills. We didn't charge anybody to come in. We paid for all the seminars, our secretaries, utilities, taxes, and you name it. We covered all the bills. And we developed a board after that for a while. And finally, we do start charge people if they can pay, just to help pay for the lights and taxes. But we haven't taken a paycheck in 16 years. So we do it strictly from our heart. And now we coach couples. What do I mean by coaching? We have a husband and wife, meets with a husband and wife for an hour and a half or 2 hour session. And it's a very close, intimate relationship. And then we teach them skills on what would make a difference on how to live their marriage. And then we also teach seminars at our facility where we have sometimes 8 to 20 couples. We also do those in 4 or 5 different countries. We just got back from Jamaica. So we're trying to also educate other people in other countries and let them teach what we teach in their countries.
Yeah. So you're training the trainer model to help with the influence.
Yes.
That's allowing you it looks like a much better and greater reach than if you were to do this on your own, is what I'm deciphering. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about kind of the frameworks. What is it? Do you guys have a framework about what it is that you teach? Are there certain skills? You don't have to go into
Sure.
depth, but if you got some basic framework on that.
Well, let's start with the basic purpose. So our education is called the point of impact. And so one of the revelations that I received was that um, if people would come to Christ or the cross at the point of impact, a point of impact is when you find yourself emotionally hijacked in your relationship with your spouse, that if they would actually do that, that their lives would go a lot better instead of waiting until you're in the mess of things. So many of us try to fix it when the problem has just gotten so big and so out of hand and everybody's so angry that there's nobody can have an emotional, healthy conversation. So the point of impact is understanding how are those made. When I talked about our childhood, I was beaten for things that I didn't do as a child, and they were pretty
Hmm.
severe beatings. As an adult, I presently have a falsely accused wound. In other words, if I feel falsely accused, subconsciously it takes me back to what my dad did to me. I don't
Sure.
do it consciously. It's like this neural pathway that is gets triggered in my brain. The scripture would talk to us about the transformation of our mind. I now have transformation of my mind, but those triggers still exist in my brain. And what I've done is created new neural pathways through education, not to go down that same road every time.
Hmm. Yeah, I love
And so
it.
we teach people,
Neurolinguistic programming, right? Yeah.
yeah, well, we teach people how the system operates, if you want to call it that. We go into neurology and how the brain works, how it stores information, but we say it in layman's terms that people can fully understand it. And then we teach them how to learn to do something different.
Hmm.
Most of us in life, we develop basic communication skills. I'm either a fight, flight, or freeze person. In other
Hmm.
words, I'm going to fight about something when I'm aggravated. I'm going to flee. I'm going to go, run away and do something different, or I'm going to freeze. I'm not even going to talk about it. And none of those three communication skills work. My wife and I was a fighter. My wife was a freezer. I would come to her with a problem that I wasn't happy about, and she would just freeze and not talk about it. And for those of you that are freezers, you think you're being nice, but for someone that wants to communicate, if you won't communicate with them, it's like stabbing them. So
Hmm.
when I say none of those communication skills work, they do not. But yet we do them because it's learned behavior on how we have survived our life, even before we met our spouse. And then we develop what are called dirty fighting tactics, things that we do when there's conflict. Some of us use name calling. Some of us bring up more than one subject at a time. Some of us are conflict avoiders. Some of us, we switch the subject matter. We have these tactics that we use, and they're automatic. It's not like you have to even think about them, and they're automatic because you've done them your whole life, and none of them produce love. So when I use a dirty fighting tactic, such as stonewalling, stonewalling is
Hmm.
not talking about the subject matter at all. Your spouse is never going to feel loved. It's just going to put fear into them. So we walk them through a process of understanding, okay, what am I doing good and what am I doing that produces no fruit? Dirty fighting tactics produce no fruit. Love does. And so we teach them how to do love the way 1 Corinthians 13 describes it.
I love it. Yeah. So very biblical, very Christian based. getting people to really understand how to communicate with love.
Yeah, we have them do a love test. So a love test
Mm,
is basically 1 Corinthians 13 with blanks. Love is
mm,
patient, love is kind. So
yep.
we've just put blanks there and we say we want you to put your name where the word love normally appears if you're that way in your marriage with your spouse most of the time. And you'll
Hmm.
be surprised how many people can't put their names on those lines, you know.
Interesting. Their
They
own
keep
names.
records,
Yeah.
yeah, they keep records of wrongs, they're not hopeful, they don't feel like persevering, it's a real revelation when they can see it in black and white that, okay, this is the way God designed me. This is the full description of love. And the person that I'm married to, I'm only doing maybe a third of these things.
Yeah.
And we haven't become aware of that. And then
Interesting.
from there, we teach them the dirty fighting tactics. I say, well, if you're not using love, you're using dirty fighting tactics as a way to show communication with your spouse, and they're never going to feel loved. Just never.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes into skills. Then we teach them skills on how to make the other their spouse feel loved through communication skills.
What do you think the most important aspect of that framework is for you that you've seen that works? If they do one of those, steps, the most important piece, what do you think it is?
So we have a communication skill called I-rave, and it's where you repeat, affirm, and validate what your partner is saying. Most of us don't do that. We just listen and then we respond.
Hmm.
So when I take the time to acknowledge like how it is for the other person, kind of like what Jesus did when they're getting ready to stone the woman, he took a moment and said, okay, they have the right to do this. So he actually got into their world, right? So many of us, we don't get into our spouse's world. We're just too fast to give our opinion, our help, our thoughts. And so what made the biggest difference in our marriage, and I'm not sure this is exactly the answer to the question you asked, but I can tell you of all the communication skills that I learned that this made the biggest difference for my wife and I, because I grew up in a home where no one listened to me. No one cared about what was going on in my life. And so I
Hmm.
have a lot of woundedness from that. So when my wife takes a moment just to repeat, affirm, and validate what I've said, and I'm not saying she agreed with me, but she takes the time to repeat, affirm, and validates what I'm saying and cares, we have a lot better communication.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no question when someone feels that trust again, right?
Yeah.
You're listening
Yep.
to me,
You're
therefore
listening
I
to me.
can give you more.
Yes.
Then you feel like that person is going to take what it is you're giving
Yeah.
and treat it kindly. Um, I-
Yes.
it makes a lot of sense, and I've done a lot of research and study on communication and skills around especially married people and the differences that we have. But you're exactly right. I think this listening, this validating, and affirmation is huge, huge. We need to practice being better listeners. What would you say is the one, two, maybe three things that people can do, couples can do, or individuals can even do right now to help them affirm or validate better so that they can have that level of communication?
Well, all of our communication skills are on our websites. You can even print them out. They're pretty basic. And we've also recorded videos of exactly how to do them. My wife and I have sat down. So that would be a huge step to be able to use multiple ways to do that on our website at marriageandfamilyworks.com. So it's free to print it out. We have this isn't exactly the answer. You're asking me questions and I'm not giving you the exact answers and it's kind of
You're
intentional. So
doing
I
great.
am listening to you. Okay, I am
No,
listening to
you're
you though.
you're doing good. You're doing
Okay. Every night before we go to bed, we give each other an appreciation.
good.
We're married 33 years, and here's why. Marriage is not always easy. You've got to look for the good in the person you're with. And when you give someone an appreciation and you say, I appreciate you for, and they just receive it by saying thank you, what that does is the other person feels that, wow, you've noticed, you care, you appreciate. And it's a lot different than a thank you. So every night, if you're a little fly on the wall in our bedroom, you'll hear my wife and I, last thing before we go to bed is to give each other an appreciation. And then what that does, it's kind of hard not to sleep good if the last thing you heard is what's good about you.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's
Well,
and what else can people do is take a few minutes to learn to do something different. Practice raving. Like I said, repeat, affirm, and validate what your spouse says. Just try it on. And then what else could people do? Learn to forgive. And not just say I'm sorry. We have a forgiveness tool also. There's a book out called The Languages of Apology. And for those of you that don't know this, we all have a different language of apology. And the tool that we have covers all the different languages. So when I hurt my wife's feelings, all she needs to hear me say is I'm sorry and change my behavior. When my wife really hurts my feelings, I need a 5-page written essay. I need a game plan how it's never going to happen again. I want to know how sorry she is. I want her to acknowledge my feelings, and then I'll think about forgiving. Now that's an exaggeration, but I'm showing you that I have a much deeper need in the area of forgiveness than my wife does. So we need to understand what our spouse needs.
hmm.
And on our website is what's called a needs assessment. Again, free to print it out. It'll tell you what your spouse's top 3 needs are and 3 ways that you can meet those needs. It's a very easy, basic insight into how to really make your wife or your husband feel like they're a priority. Most people are in our
Right.
office because needs are not being met.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the rave model. I love that. So good. I love frameworks, and I love to bring people on who have a framework, something that they've learned through their own experience or research, and being able to take that away. My wife and I have a notebook,
Mm,
and we pray before we go to bed. We read scriptures, and
mm.
for the longest time, Don, we've been writing down in this notebook. I write something about her, she writes something about me, and we just kind of, throw it back and forth. And it's interesting, the whole love languages thing of, different ways of expressing, love. Maybe it's, affection, physical affection. Maybe it's words of affirmation, like we were just talking
Yeah,
about. But maybe
yeah,
sometimes it's
yeah.
the written word. Um,
Mm,
and just we've been out of that habit recently. My wife and I got back into that habit, and I can tell you from experience of not doing that for a while, this does make a big difference
it
because
does. It
when
does.
someone tells you that, and there's no reason why they have to, like, it's not forced, it's real and authentic.
Yeah.
It could be the best part of your day. I've just been, wow, I've had a rough day, but that really made all the difference for me. And man, do we need that connection, right? We need that intimate connection with each other. So really
We do,
appreciate you
and
bringing this
we
up.
we really encourage people also once a week, ask your spouse what they'd like to be appreciated for, and then give them that appreciation before they go to bed. So,
Yeah.
like if I would ask my wife, "What do you want to be appreciated for today?" She might say, "Well, I'd like to be appreciated for, having a really hard conversation with my mom and my brother, and this happened and that happened," and I get to give her exactly what she asks for
That's
by
great.
giving her. So that's once a week. You would ask your
Sure.
spouse, "What can I appreciate you for?" Because there may be some things that you want to be appreciated for, and they have no idea that they want to be appreciated for.
Yep. Yeah.
But that
Yes.
connection,
That's great.
that connection, yeah,
Well, and again, if especially if we've done something, right? I know as a male, men, we do a lot of things to help our spouse, and that sometimes like, well, you just do that because you have to, right? And women do the same thing.
yes,
But
yeah,
if we look at our deep in abiding needs here, if I'm going to work every day, my wife doesn't appreciate that, then I mean she does, but if if she didn't
right, yeah,
it wouldn't hit the same. But
yeah,
I tell you, when she's really appreciative, and my kids are appreciative, and they understand what dad does, which kind of brings us to my last topic here. But when that's appreciated,
yeah,
man, it makes me want to, you know,
yeah,
do do that with even better vigor and energy. So and I'm sure same thing. Like if I am at home, coming home, and I really appreciate my wife for the things she does with the kids, she homeschools them. Man, it lights her up.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
such important topic, Don. Where can people go if they want to know more about the Rave framework and what you guys are doing with Marriage and Family Works.
So then go to our website, marriageandfamilyworks.com. The needs assessment is on the front page of the web page. And then under resources, you'll see all the videos that we've recorded on how to use our communication skills. You'll be able to print the communication skills. If you have questions, you feel free to email us. As crazy as this sounds, we're not looking for more business, but we'd sure like to help more people. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have pretty crazy schedules, and it's not that I don't want to help because I do. Men, one of my categories, I was raised in pornography and I watched it to the age of 40. I've got
Nice.
some pretty good skills to help men get past that. And because of the infidelity, we have a lot of couples that contact us that are in affairs or have been through affairs, and it's pretty tragic. So, you can feel free to, I'm sorry about that. You can feel free to contact us and see what resources we might be able to help you with. We do some Zoom, but uh, not that much. We could do more. So, if you feel that, God's put you in our radar, then reach out. So, but this is not a plea for more couples. It's just, we just want to help you guys.
For sure. I love it. I get it. And wow, the work that you're doing is incredible. And we really appreciate it. Don, if you could leave us with one last thing, this is the Balanced Growth Show. This is about building business, especially for those out there, entrepreneurs, business owners who really are trying to pour everything they can into their businesses and they want to make an impact like you. They want to make a difference. But they need to also have that connection with their spouse and that balance with their family. What would you say, maybe one or two things that really helped you or that you've seen in your life that's helped you to do that?
Yeah, so I've had my own businesses since I was 20 years old. And, one of my companies was doing 25, $30 million a year. So I was pretty big in what I was doing. And we exported cars around the country. But what I learned to do was take weekends off. That was my commitment to my wife and my family, right? So when it came to weekends, I was there. Now, during the week, there was a pretty crazy schedule that we ran. And I'm not sure I do it exactly the same, but I can look back and reflect that I'm so thankful that I took all the weekends to be with my kids. And sometimes I just take the kids and my wife would have alone time, and that's what she needed. So, every relationship's a little bit different, but I
Hmm.
would look for common ground where everybody can get what they're looking for. Women usually want quality time. They don't need a quantity so much. They want quality. So, guys, if we're coming home and just turning on the TV and we're not doing quality time and we're home with them, that's not what they're needing. So, take a look at how can you meet the need? What is the need, and how can you meet it? So that would be my first encouragement, is to figure out for me how to take weekends off and then have quality time with my spouse and for my spouse.
Love it. Really appreciate this. I talk about that in achieving balance, nonstop time, right? Where you invest your
Yeah.
time, that really
Yeah.
is an indicator of where your priorities are,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
making sure that you make the time for your family, make the time to be with your spouse. They really appreciate that, because
Mhm.
it's like, well, when's dad going to be home? When do I get time with dad? I think that's huge. And I'm not saying that every entrepreneur and business owner is a dad, but I know male audience is a lot of times who we're speaking to here, and it can be really difficult to make that time, but it's worth it, isn't it? It's worth it.
It is, and no regrets. Just
Yeah.
so that is one thing. And my dad never gave me a compliment in his life, except he complimented me on that. He goes, "You have figured out how to take weekends off." He said, "I never could." So, and it's weird, of all the things that my dad ever said to me, that I don't remember
It's
anything
very
hardly ever
interesting.
good. Like, that was the one good thing that he said. And so
Man.
it stood out because I know he lived a life of just working 7 days a week. And of course, the alcoholism, didn't make him as productive. So, yeah,
Wow.
you got to break those
Well,
cycles, guys. Break the
break it.
cycles. Yeah.
Well, please reach out to Don Power and his lovely wife, Angie. And, if especially if you're dealing with addiction and infidelity, you guys really have a very unique approach that is very practical for people. And I hope you will reach out to them, stay in touch with them. Marriage and familyworks.com, right? Is that the right website?
That is correct. Yes, yes.
Okay, awesome.
And
Take a peek.
we welcome you no matter what faith you are or no faith, so we
Love
can
it.
talk in both languages, secular or faith-based. So don't let that stop you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for your time
Okay.
today.
Yes.
And thanks for listening, everybody out there, to the
Yes.
Balanced Growth Show. Do all the things. Let us know what you think about this episode. We love to get your feedback, and pick up my book, Marry and Grow Rich, at marryandgrowrichbook.com. It is ready for purchase. You can get on Amazon for $20. You can pick it up on our website for $4.95 for a download. But we will see you next time on the Balanced Growth Show. Again, I'm Dr. Travis Perry, and thank you, Dawn, again for being on the show.
You're very welcome.